So this HOA boss literally destroys my cabin entrance right when I'm sharing a drink with our state's top attorney. She just performed 7 crimes right in front of the only person in the country who could lock her away forever. I'm talking complete destruction. Expensive shoes crunching on shattered wood. The whole scene docked this lady in her expensive designer jacket, smelling like aggressive perfume that costs more than my monthly truck bill. Barges into my grandfather's property, yelling about rules and authority like she's the owner. Completely unaware who she just confronted. Completely clueless, she's broadcasting her own criminal charges to 3,200 followers online. 7 months back, I assumed Delilah was just another control-obsessed resident. Reality was she'd been operating a $5 million theft operation, and I was accidentally about to expose her entire criminal business to collapse. What would your move be if some HOA maniac invaded your private land during the biggest appointment of your entire life? Leave your thoughts down below and mention your location. I promise many of you have experienced these power-hungry community controllers. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Let me rewind and explain how this entire disaster began. 7 months back, everything felt pretty excellent. My name is Derek Hamilton. I'm 53 years old. And after 31 years of working through muddy construction sites, building electrical systems throughout 4 counties, I'd finally reached my retirement dream. The ultimate prize was my grandfather's lakeside property on Silver Springs Lake. 3 acres of absolute paradise that Gramps purchased way back in 1964 for $900. Can you imagine that? $900 for waterfront land that's currently valued higher than most family homes. This wasn't some modern luxury mansion, understand. We're discussing handcrafted timber walls, a rock fireplace that Gramps constructed with his weathered hands, and a screen deck that made satisfying sounds in perfect ways. I'd maintained it totally independent from utilities, by preference. Solar equipment humming softly overhead, natural spring water tasting like youthful memories, and a waste system that functioned superior to most urban installations. The dawn fog floating across the water each sunrise reminded me why Gramps selected this location. He always told me the property selects you, never the opposite direction. Intelligent fellow, he also warned me that when somebody desires your property intensely, discover their reasoning because it's typically worth considerably more than their claims. Then she appeared. Delilah Crawford, though locals simply called her that HOA lunatic, entered our tranquil lakeside neighborhood like a destructive storm wearing designer outfits. 59 years young, recently arrived from some California development where apparently controlling neighborhoods was a professional occupation. She operated this bright white luxury SUV with custom plates reading authority first. No exaggeration. And displayed her HOA leader badge on her jacket like some law enforcement insignia. This woman possessed one life goal, transforming our peaceful waterfront into what she labeled an exclusive premium neighborhood. But here's information I didn't understand initially. 4 senior couples had already transferred their properties to mystery purchasers within 3 months of her showing up. Strange timing, correct? Her initial attack happened on a Wednesday sunrise. I'm relaxing on Gramps' deck, enjoying coffee, and observing a pair of water birds teaching their young ones to fish when I detect these aggressive tapping noises on my wooden pier. High-end shoes. At 6:30 morning on my personal land. 11 minutes afterward, she's attaching this formal-appearing document to my screen entrance. Violation notice. Unattractive pier construction damaging neighborhood property worth. Penalty $550. Adherence demanded within 73 hours or additional daily charges will accumulate. I needed to review it twice. My age doc, the identical one Gramps and I had strengthened together when I was 13, was suddenly an ugly feature endangering the complete area's housing market. Acting reasonably, I approached to clarify that my land actually existed before the HOA by roughly 41 years. Know her response to me standing there in my personal driveway, arms crossed like she controlled everything? Every resident beside this water reports to me, darling. Question the Morrison family how successfully resisting me turned out for them. The Morrisons were my senior neighbors who mysteriously chosen to relocate recently after residing here 24 years. The connections weren't forming yet, but something uncomfortable settled in my gut. That's when she began her documentation routine, walking around my property like some real estate evaluator, capturing images of my solar equipment, my produce garden, even my grandfather's hand-carved deck barriers. The odor of her chemical air spray drifting from that running luxury vehicle made me nauseous. Before the week concluded, I received 4 additional citations. Every single one arrived with increasing penalties. Every single one communicated crystal clear that Delilah Crawford had started war on everything my ancestors had created on this ground. I figured I faced your standard power-obsessed resident. Irritating, absolutely, but controllable. What I didn't realize was that I just marked myself as a victim in a scheme, considerably larger and more threatening than minor HOA drama. Gramps' advice repeated in my thoughts. Discover why they desire your property. I was preparing to learn why, and it would transform everything. Delilah didn't delay escalating the serious measures. 4 days after my deadline expired, because honestly, I wasn't destroying Gramps' dock for some aspiring tyrant. A registered letter showed up that made my morning coffee taste terrible. Legal warning. Breaking of neighborhood waterway rules. The official heading showed one of those expensive legal offices where the lawyers probably bill more hourly than I earn monthly. The legal language essentially claimed my dock was unlawfully extending in the shared waterway, and I owed $3,300 in backdated violation charges. Additionally, they threatened to attach a property claim if I didn't settle within 11 days. My immediate reaction was fear. These individuals had attorneys. I possessed a toolbox and stubborn attitude. But then I recalled something Gramps always emphasized during those extended fishing sessions. Derek, when somebody's attempting to legally intimidate you away from your land, the actual facts are always in the government records. Never believe their words. Locate the real documentation. So I traveled to the government office, that dusty storage area where all the crucial information gets hidden under years of administrative clutter. The employee, a kind woman named Barbara, who remembered Gramps from his tournament fishing years, assisted me retrieving the original land surveys. I discovered this method from my worker organization years. Always verify the original records before some lawyer attempts to confuse you with impressive letterhead. What I discovered made my blood heat up. My grandfather's property didn't simply reach the water's boundary. It extended 52 feet into the water. The official deed marked and certified from 1964 was completely obvious. That dock wasn't invading on shared land. It was positioned directly in the center of my waterfront. But here's the actual surprise. The HOA wasn't created until 1999, 36 years after Gramps purchased his property. I remember my former supervisor always mentioning that older lands often possess privileges that newer constructions can't. Challenge. Something about protected. Exceptions that override any community organization rules. Equipped with duplicates of everything, I returned to my property feeling quite proud of myself. That confidence lasted precisely until I attempted leaving for supplies and discovered Delilah's luxury vehicle positioned sideways, blocking my driveway. Not alongside it, not nearby it, straight obstructing it like she was performing some single-person traffic blockade. When I tapped on her glass, she lowered it barely enough to communicate through the opening. "Oh, Derek, I'm simply examining the neighborhood parking rules." This could require extended time. The mechanical sound of her running motor combined with that sickening sweet air spray generated this bizarre atmosphere of indirect aggressive madness. Here I existed, a mature individual who constructed half the region's power framework, being trapped in my personal driveway by a suburban resident with a superiority problem. But Delilah was just beginning her campaign. Within 1 week, she'd arranged something labeled the Waterfront Enhancement Group, which sounds pleasant until you understand it. was essentially an attack force targeting anyone who didn't match her exclusive club vision. Suddenly, residents who greeted me for years were avoiding contact. Her social network posts were brilliant, examples of indirect aggressive combat. Worried about ugly lands affecting everyone's property worth. Some individuals just don't value the neighborhood. The response area became a feeding chaos. Individuals I'd known for years were suddenly authorities on land regulations, repeating Delilah's arguments like she was some real estate prophet. 4 of my neighbors actually apologized to me quietly, Richard and Jennifer. Davis pulled me aside during my sunset walk and admitted that Delilah had firmly recommended they protest about my land or experience their own violation attack. Apparently, she'd already targeted elderly Mr. Reynolds for having unauthorized flower containers and threatened the young family with the infant over their ugly play area. She's gathered information on everyone, Richard whispered, looking around like Delilah might be concealed in the vegetation with recording equipment. Her spouse works at the government headquarters, influential, you understand, political connections. That struck me like cold reality. This wasn't simply neighborhood conflict anymore. This woman possessed influence beyond our small waterfront neighborhood. That evening, I discovered orange spray color covering my mailbox. Aggressive bright marks spelling obey or depart. My surveillance camera, solar operated and concealed behind a tree, recorded everything, including Delilah's vehicle identification as she departed at 3 a.m. When I contacted the law office the following sunrise, guess who responded? Officer Brett Crawford, Delilah's nephew. He examined the destruction report once, shrugged, and stated probably just teenagers. You understand their behavior. The rough texture of that spray color under my fingers as I attempted removing it felt like sandpaper against my spirit. Gramps used to mention sometimes you need superior weapons for a superior battle. Time to locate some superior weapons. Delilah's following action arrived disguised as community responsibility, which somehow made it even more frustrating. She'd realized that straight confrontation wasn't succeeding. So she chose to weaponize the complete government system against me. It began with a courteous knock on my entrance from Construction Inspector Daniel Morrison, a person I'd actually collaborated with on various projects through the years. The uncomfortable expression on his features told me everything I required to understand before he even spoke. Derek, I'm genuinely sorry regarding this, but I received a protest about unauthorized constructions on your land. You understand I must investigate these situations. 4 hours afterward, Daniel had examined every section of my property with his documentation and measuring equipment. His determination everything was not simply meeting regulations, but actually surpassing present safety requirements. Gramps might have been traditional, but he constructed things permanently. Whoever submitted this protest, Daniel muttered as he gathered his supplies, either doesn't understand what they're discussing, or they're simply attempting to waste everyone's time. The following day brought Environmental Inspector Laura Chun, investigating claims of my waste system polluting the water environment. Again, operating flawlessly. Superior to most recent installations, she confessed. Then Fire Inspector Carlos Martinez appeared to examine my solar equipment for dangerous electrical problems. Perfect approval there also. Every inspection required a day of tranquility and a portion of my retirement sanity. But more significantly, every false claim was generating an official documentation trail, making me appear like some problematic landowner. I recalled something my organization representative used to caution us regarding administrative harassment was a traditional method because it appeared official on documentation even when it was pure malicious intent. While I managed the inspection sequence, Delilah was occupied performing her publicity campaign. She'd succeeded getting herself featured by Channel 8's Neighborhood Spotlight program, positioning herself as this worried resident battling to defend our family-safe waterfront setting. The broadcast story was a brilliant example of selective modification. She displayed strategically, photographed images making my property appear like some wilderness structure, discussed dangerous situations threatening youngsters' welfare, and presented herself as a courageous supporter standing against careless landowners. What genuinely made my blood heat was observing her standing on my dock. The one she insisted was unlawfully trespassing, while she performed her worried resident act for the recording equipment. The sharp sound of my phone vibrating with frustrated messages from residents who viewed the broadcast felt like rapid gunfire. Half the waterfront neighborhood now assumed I was some environmental danger. But here's where Delilah made her initial genuine error. She became ambitious. My former colleague Nathan Davis from the electrical organization contacted me after viewing the broadcast story. "Derek, that woman's completely dishonest, and everyone recognizes it. You constructed half the sustainable power framework in this region. Your solar installation is the one I utilize as demonstration when I'm instructing trainees. Within 3 days, Nathan had arranged a group of my previous colleagues to visit and examine my land. Reality is having 21 expert electricians publicly support your construction tends to eliminate the dangerous installation story quite rapidly. That's when situations began getting fascinating. My attorney friend Charles Thompson. We had attended secondary school together, visited for a drink, and mentioned something that made my attention increase. You realize, Derek, the state prosecutor's department has been examining HOA corruption situations throughout the region. Various neighborhoods reporting similar harassment behaviors to what you're experiencing. What type of behaviors? I questioned, though I was quite certain I already understood the response. Senior property owners receiving struck with ridiculous citations. Land worth artificially reduced. Mysterious purchasers appearing with immediate offers. Sound familiar? It matched every situation I experienced. Charles clarified that these operations typically involved somebody with government relationships providing protection, while the harassment effort expelled long-time inhabitants. The lands would then get transferred to construction companies for enormous profits. The prosecutor's department is seeking witnesses. Charles continued, individuals who recorded the harassment and can demonstrate the behavior. Somebody like you might be precisely what they require. The mechanical sound of my refrigerator seemed unnaturally prominent as that data registered. Delilah wasn't simply some power-obsessed resident. She was potentially involved in something considerably larger and more organized. That evening, I began a comprehensive record of every interaction, every citation, every inspection that had mysteriously surfaced on my schedule. I also began investigating Delilah's history more thoroughly. Reality is her spouse, Thomas Crawford, wasn't simply some minor government worker. He was the political organization treasurer, a role that provided him access to construction strategies, regulation modifications, and government advantages throughout various regions. The smell of fresh coffee. She'd apparently chosen that administrative harassment wasn't advancing sufficiently quickly, so she switched to complete character destruction. It began with a social network post that made my stomach drop. Critical safety worries regarding aggressive conduct from waterfront inhabitant. Please maintain your youngsters away from the eastern waterfront section. We'll be requesting protective actions. Aggressive conduct? Me, the person who assisted arranging the yearly youth fishing competition for 16 years continuous. Within hours, that post had been distributed 46 times. The response area became a digital mob of individuals who'd never even encountered me. Everyone persuaded I was some threatening lunatic based on Delilah's carefully constructed victim story. I always suspected something was wrong about that individual. Discovered he threatened an HOA committee member. Grateful we have courageous individuals like Delilah protecting us. The genuinely disturbing aspect, half these responses originate from accounts with standard stock photographs. The type of artificial accounts that government operatives utilize to increase their messaging. Delilah wasn't simply distributing falsehoods. She was directing a professional destruction effort. 3 days afterward, she requested a protection order. The application, which became public documentation, described me as an unstable person making verbal dangers against neighborhood leaders. Complete invention. But it didn't matter. The request alone became evidence that I was threatening. Judge Helen Martinez, who actually knew my ancestors from history, examined Delilah's proof once and rejected the demand for absence of believable records. But the destruction was finished. Now there existed an official government record with my identity and the term dangers on it. The emotional burden was beginning affecting me. I relaxed on Gramps' deck in the evenings, drinking a beer and questioning whether this battle was worth destroying the tranquil retirement I'd worked 31 years to achieve. The burden of his leather chair felt different currently, less like comfort, more like the obligation of maintaining a heritage that somebody was systematically attempting to eliminate. But precisely when I was beginning considering surrendering, something wonderful occurred. The neighborhood began resisting. Judge Martinez wasn't the only one who recalled my ancestors. Retired Judge William Carter, who used to fish with Gramps during the 70s, appeared at my entrance with a container of coffee and some uninvited legal guidance. Derek, that woman's performing a scheme your grandfather would have recognized instantly. She's depending on you feeling separated and defeated. Don't provide her that pleasure. William clarified that recorded harassment efforts like this typically indicated larger criminal behavior. Individuals don't invest this much effort over minor neighborhood conflicts. There's finances involved here. Significant finances. The local veteran organization, where I've been a participant for 21 years, released a declaration labeling Delilah's claims groundless attacks on a respected neighborhood member. The Preservation Association contributed, emphasizing my property's historical importance as one of the final original constructions on the water. Even the environmental organization that supervised water quality praised my eco-friendly lifestyle approach. It felt like the complete decent portion of our neighborhood was supporting me. The bitter flavor of pressure was finally transforming to something that felt like optimism. But Delilah wasn't finished. Not even remotely. Her following action was evil in its straightforwardness. She somehow persuaded the service provider to examine irregularities in my electrical connection. For 4 days, I experienced no electricity while they examined my solar system connection for safety problems. Then arrived the false law reports. Questionable behavior at my property during daylight hours. Loud sounds suggesting potential domestic conflict when I was obviously alone. Possible illegal activity based on the unusual quantity of guests. Guests who proved to be organization colleagues visiting to demonstrate assistance. Every contact brought law officers to my entrance. Every interaction generated another occurrence documentation. Every documentation contributed to the expanding record, making me appear like a troublesome inhabitant. The most irritating aspect was that Officer Brett Crawford was typically the responding official. He'd appear, question a few superficial inquiries, and depart with this expression that communicated he understood precisely what his aunt was executing. During one particularly bizarre interaction, he actually possessed the audacity to mention you understand, Mr. Hamilton. If you simply apologized to my aunt and aligned your land into adherence, all these difficulties would probably disappear. That's when I understood this wasn't simply regarding me anymore. Delilah was demonstrating other landowners what occurred when you didn't submit. The Morrisons, the senior couple who'd mysteriously chosen to transfer, probably experienced this identical disaster. The electronic alert of my phone became a source of worry instead of connection. Every notification could be another resident opposing me. Another false claim, another development in Delilah's psychological warfare effort. But it also brought communications of assistance from individuals I'd forgotten even knew me. The battle was distant from concluded, but I was finally comprehending the rules of the BA. Competition Dr. Discovery arrived when I was executing the most boring activity imaginable, organizing documentation for my appointment with the state prosecutor's department. Charles had organized the complete situation, clarifying that they required comprehensive records for their regional HOA corruption examination. I was positioned at Gramps' traditional wooden table, surrounded by stacks of citations, inspection documents, and legal dangers, when something attracted my attention. One of Delilah's violation documents had this tiny footer I'd never noticed previously. Penalties payable to Waterfront Properties Community Enhancement Account. Identification number 958324. Community Enhancement Account. That sounded official enough, but something regarding it troubled me. Maybe it was 31. Years of reviewing electrical agreements and identifying the detailed language that contractors utilize to deceive property owners. But I chose to examine deeper. The Government Employees Department had become my secondary residence by this moment. So Barbara knew precisely what I was seeking when I requested regarding HOA financial documentation. She retrieved the public records and distributed them across the surface like she was distributing cards. "Here's the situation, Derek," she stated, modifying her reading glasses. "Property owner organizations must submit yearly reports similar to any other organization. Let me demonstrate what I discovered." The figures didn't calculate, not even remotely. Throughout the previous 3 years, the HOA had gathered $315,000 in emergency evaluations for water dock repairs that were never finished. Another $165,000 had supposedly transferred to expert landscaping, services provided by Crawford Grounds and Care, which according to government business documentation was controlled by Delilah's relative. But here's the surprise. The landscaping business had been established precisely 4 weeks after Delilah became HOA leader. I recall Gramps' guidance regarding pursuing the financial trail. When somebody generates a business immediately after obtaining authority, they're typically generating it to transfer finances to themselves. The insurance claims were even more obvious. The HOA had requested for storm destruction compensation 4 times in the previous 20 months. Difficulty was I'd experienced every storm on this water, and none of them had produced a type of destruction that would justify $103,000 in insurance settlements. Barbara assisted me cross-checking the insurance claims with actual weather documentation from the National Climate Service. The dates didn't correspond. The HOA was claiming storm destruction on days when the climate had been completely clear. "Derek," Barbara whispered, even though we were alone in the documentation area. "This appears like deception. Clear and straightforward deception." My hands were actually trembling as I duplicated everything. The smooth texture of those record pages felt like holding proof that could transform everything. This wasn't simply harassment anymore. This was arranged theft from the complete waterfront neighborhood. The land administration charges were the concluding piece of the mystery. The HOA was compensating $5,500 monthly to something labeled Silver Springs Land Solutions for Administrative Services. But when I examined the business registration, the recorded location was a postal container in the identical postal region where Delilah resided. Everything connected into position like mechanisms in a lock. Delilah's harassment effort wasn't simply regarding authority or personal resentment. She was systematically reducing land worth to enable a construction operation while simultaneously stealing from the neighborhood account. The senior couples who transferred their properties hadn't simply been harassed into departing. They'd been compelled to transfer at below market cost because Delilah's artificial land worth concerns had frightened away legitimate purchasers. Those mysterious immediate purchasers were probably connected to the identical construction organization that was benefiting from the stolen finances. I considered the Morrisons, probably calculating their savings in some restricted apartment, never understanding they'd been robbed twice. Once when they transferred their ideal residence for minimal value, and again through the charges they contributed into Delilah's illegal account. The flavor of dark coffee had never been so unpleasant. This wasn't simply regarding my property anymore. Delilah had been stealing from everyone, including the residents she persuaded to oppose me. Gramps always stated that when you discover corruption, it's typically larger than you assume. He was accurate. Delilah wasn't simply operating an HOA. She was operating a criminal organization. And I was preparing to deliver the proof to the one individual in the region who could eliminate it permanently. That evening, I transformed Gramps' rear bedroom into something that resembled a law examination unit. Maps of the waterfront land distributed across the surfaces, displaying original boundaries versus present HOA assertions. Timeline charts monitoring Delilah's harassment effort alongside questionable financial exchanges. Photographs, recordings, and records arranged by potential criminal accusations. I felt like one of those television investigators, except instead of pursuing serial criminals, I was pursuing suburban thieves. The state prosecutor's department had designated 3 prosecutors to my situation, Michelle Roberts and Christopher Lee, who appeared the following sunrise appearing. Like they intended serious action. Michelle was this sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who reminded me of the safety examiners who used to maintain. You was honest on construction locations. Christopher was younger, maybe early 30s, but he possessed this quiet intensity that suggested he'd already sent numerous financial criminals to confinement. Mr. Hamilton, Michelle stated, distributing the financial records across Gramps' dining table. What you reveal here extends far beyond straightforward HOA harassment. This is organized deception that could affect hundreds of families. Christopher retrieved a tablet and began connecting points I hadn't even observed. We've been examining similar operations in 5 other regions. The behavior is always identical. Politically connected persons utilize HOA roles to manipulate land worth while stealing neighborhood finances. That's when they informed me regarding the federal involvement. Agent Jennifer Martin from the Financial Crime Division had been monitoring construction deception throughout the area. Apparently, my records was the absent piece that could connect together various ongoing examinations, the excellence of financial crimes. Agent Martin clarified during our video contact, is that everything creates a documentation trail. Your HOA documentation displays traditional money concealment, artificial invoices, hidden businesses, insurance deception. But we require more than simply records. We require witnesses and recorded proof of ongoing criminal behavior. Charles, my attorney colleague, had been functioning behind the scenes also. He connected with 19 other waterfront families who'd experienced similar harassment. When we assembled them at the Veteran Hall, their accounts painted a picture that made my blood heat. The Thompson family had compensated $9,000 in fraudulent violation charges before transferring their property for 32% below market worth. The Rodriguez family had been struck with emergency evaluations, totaling $13,000 for water improvements that never occurred. Elderly Mrs. Chun had been so frightened by Delilah's legal dangers that she'd relocated with her son in Texas, abandoning the residence where she'd resided for 45 years. Every account followed the identical strategy. Increasing harassment, manufactured problems, pressure to transfer, and every family had contributed to that neighborhood enhancement account that was genuinely simply Delilah's personal illegal fund. Here's what most individuals don't comprehend regarding HOA deception. Clarify retired accountant George Wilson, who'd volunteered to assist analyzing the financial documentation. Property owner. Organizations are demanded to submit official tax documents yearly if they satisfy certain income requirements. Legitimate organizations submit consistently. Corrupt ones typically don't because honest accounting would reveal their theft. George had revealed that our HOA hadn't submitted proper tax documents in over 3 years, despite gathering hundreds of thousands in charges and evaluations. That single fact could activate federal tax avoidance accusations on top of everything else. The technical strategy meeting felt like organizing a military function. We possess financial proof, witness accounts, recorded harassment, and recorded deception. But Agent Martin desired something larger. She desired to apprehend Delilah in the process of actively performing crimes. The optimal method to construct an airtight situation, she clarified, is to generate a circumstance where the suspect's criminal conduct is recorded by law officials in actual time. We require her to incriminate herself on recording. That's when Charles suggested the flawless arrangement. The state prosecutor has been seeking an opportunity to announce new HOA reform regulations. What if she conducted that declaration at Derek's property? It's symbolically flawless, defending property owner privileges in the precise location where those privileges were breached. Michelle's eyes illuminated. And if Delilah's behavior continues, she'll absolutely attempt to interrupt any questionable behavior at Derek's land. Her necessity to dominate the circumstance will override her rational judgment. We invested the following week preparing for what Agent Martin labeled a supervised confrontation situation. Expert recording equipment concealed throughout my property. Undercover officials positioned around the water. Various law agencies coordinated for immediate reaction. The neighborhood coalition had expanded also. Local media was notified to potential breaking information. Social media efforts were prepared to oppose any false stories Delilah might attempt to create. Assistance networks were activated for the post-confrontation duration. My former organization training activated. When you're organizing a complex task, you prepare for every possible situation and always possess backup systems. We possess backup strategies for the backup strategies. The arrangement was established. Delilah's behavior was so predictable that we could practically write her following action. All we needed to execute was wait for her to destroy the entrance. Literally, Delilah must have detected the barriers closing in, because her conduct transformed from calculated harassment to complete destruction. It was like observing a trapped animal attack in every direction, becoming more threatening as her options vanished. The initial indication was my solar equipment mysteriously malfunctioning on a Wednesday sunrise. I'd awakened to exhausted batteries and error signals flashing on the inverter display. When my electrician colleague Nathan arrived to examine, he discovered clear proof of interference. Cable connections, loosened precisely enough to interrupt the system without producing obvious destruction. Derek, this is expert-level destruction, Nathan stated, photographing the proof with his phone. Whoever executed this understands electrical systems. They desired to produce difficulties without creating obvious evidence. But Nathan was more intelligent than Delilah credited him. He'd installed a concealed surveillance camera near the electrical panel after the initial occurrence, 3 evenings afterward. We recorded her directly, moving around my land at 4 a.m. with a screwdriver and cable cutters. The footage was completely obvious. Delilah Crawford, HOA leader and respected neighborhood member, destroying private land under darkness protection. The bitter smell of her cigarette smoke remained in the sunrise atmosphere, combining with the pine aroma that typically made me feel tranquil. Following arrived my boat pier. I'd traveled to town for supplies and returned to discover my boat floating halfway across the water. The heavy-duty chains I utilized to secure it had been severed with bolt cutters. Clean, intentional cuts that created metal fragments scattered across the pier planks. That boat had been Gramps' pride, a 1979 fishing boat that still operated like perfection. Discovering it striking against the opposite waterfront, its exterior scratched from the stones, felt like somebody had disrespected his memory. But Delilah's largest error was targeting my waste system. I'd recently passed a government examination with excellent results. But suddenly, my flawlessly operating system began malfunctioning. The odor was terrible. That combination of sewage and chemical substances that made your eyes water from 53 feet away. When the emergency waste service appeared, they discovered industrial-quality drain chemicals had been introduced down my system, eliminating all the beneficial bacteria and generating a toxic disaster. This is intentional destruction. The technician clarified, displaying soil samples that demonstrated chemical pollution. Somebody introduced commercial quality acids into your system. This material requires serious finances and demands specialized knowledge to utilize. The repair bill was $3,500. But more significantly, the chemical analysis provided scientific proof that this wasn't random destruction. It was calculated destruction demanding insider understanding of waste systems. While I managed sewage malfunction, Delilah was directing her publicity attack. Anonymous accounts flooded social media with posts regarding my ongoing land problems and deteriorating situations threatening community welfare. The automated accounts were so apparent, it was almost humorous. Numerous accounts with standard identities posting identical protests within minutes of each other. She'd also increased the intimidation network. Officer Brett Crawford's patrol appearance increased dramatically. He passed by my property 5 or 6 times daily, always reducing speed precisely enough to make his observation apparent. Sometimes he positioned in my driveway for 22 minutes, examining vehicle registrations of anyone who visited. The construction examiner suddenly discovered regulation problems in construction that had passed examination just weeks previously. The fire official received anonymous information regarding fire dangers that didn't exist. Environmental services received claims regarding illegal disposal in sections of my land they'd already approved. It was destruction by 1,000 cuts designed to exhaust my resources and destroy my spirit through administrative warfare. But I wasn't the only victim anymore. Delilah had begun targeting my supporters also. Nathan's electrical business permit was suddenly under examination for safety problems. William Carter, the retired judge who'd been counseling me, received a formal protest with the state legal organization regarding improper legal guidance to non-clients. The veteran organization discovered themselves experiencing a surprise fire safety examination that threatened to eliminate their weekly community events. The Preservation Association was struck with regulation protests regarding their downtown office location. Delilah was systematically attacking anyone who demonstrated me assistance, transmitting a clear communication. Support Derek Hamilton, and you'll become our following victim. The psychological burden was intense. Every sunrise brought new emergencies, new disasters, new administrative nightmares to navigate. The metallic flavor of constant pressure became as familiar as my sunrise coffee. But Delilah's desperation was also generating opportunities. Every escalation was being recorded by law officials. Every destruction act provided additional criminal proof. Her network of supporters was beginning distancing themselves as her conduct became increasingly unstable. The state prosecutor's department was observing everything, constructing imperfect situation while Delilah excavated her situation deeper with every vengeful act. Agent Martin labeled it standard criminal escalation. When perpetrators feel trapped, they often make increasingly reckless choices that provide prosecutors with the proof they require for conviction. Delilah was advancing straight into our arrangement, one destroyed solar panel at a time. Delilah's concluding strategy was so audacious it almost succeeded. She'd realized through her spouse's government relationships that I wasn't simply meeting with some random government official. I was meeting with State Prosecutor Helen Sinclair herself. And instead of retreating, Delilah chose to proceed nuclear. Her strategy was brilliant in its distorted logic. She would position herself as the victim of a government conspiracy, asserting that the region's top prosecutor was targeting her family for political reasons. If she could record herself confronting official corruption at my property, she could reverse the complete story and present herself as a courageous informant opposing authority misuse. The initial indication of her new strategy arrived through social media. She contacted Government Responsibility Network, one of those blogger networks that increases stories regarding administrative excess. Her presentation was flawless. Rural HOA leader being persecuted by large authority because her spouse worked for the opposing government organization. Rural family under attack. Government officials utilize harassment examination to eliminate political opposition was the headline that began circulating 4 days before my scheduled appointment. The story presented me as some type of hidden government operative, collaborating with corrupt prosecutors to destroy an innocent family. The response area was flooded with outrage from individuals who'd never heard of our waterfront neighborhood but were absolutely persuaded that Delilah was being wrongly targeted by political prosecutors. She'd accessed that sentiment of anti-government feeling that operates through rural neighborhoods, transforming herself into a martyr for government persecution. But Delilah's superior achievement was the live broadcast arrangement. She'd organized to transmit her confrontation with the state prosecutor live on social media, presenting it as resident journalism revealing official corruption in actual time. Her strategy was to burst into my property during the appointment, record everything, and allow her followers to distribute the footage as evidence of official wrongdoing. What she didn't understand was that we were supervising her communications. Agent Martin had received authorizations for Delilah's phone and social media accounts weeks previously. We understood regarding the blogger contact, the live broadcast strategy, even the discussion points she prepared for her spontaneous confrontation. It's actually flawless, Agent Martin clarified during our concluding coordination appointment. She's preparing to perform various crimes on live video while providing us with an actual time admission of her intentions. We couldn't have written it superior. The irony was delicious. Delilah assumed she was establishing an arrangement for us, but she was actually advancing into the most thoroughly recorded capture in HOA history. Her assistant's network was collapsing also, but she was too obsessed to notice. The other HOA committee members had quietly distanced themselves once the financial irregularities became apparent. Her spouse was experiencing his own ethics examination and couldn't provide government protection anymore. Even Officer Brett had been transferred to different patrol sections after internal investigations began questioning his response to destruction claims. But Delilah was beyond rational thinking at this moment. The psychological burden of maintaining her deception operation concealed while resisting various examinations had advanced her past the breaking limit. She was exhibiting all the traditional indications of somebody losing domination, paranoid regarding residents observing her, making increasingly threatening communications to anyone who'd supported me, persuaded that everyone was involved in some vast conspiracy against her. The evening before the state prosecutor's visit, she made threatening communications to 5 different families, cautioning them regarding consequences if they continue collaborating with official harassment. Every contact was recorded by law officials. Every single one provided additional proof of witness intimidation and criminal conspiracy. I invested that concluding evening relaxing on Gramps' deck, observing the sunset color the water in shades of gold and crimson. The sound of water birds calling to each other across the water reminded me why this location was worth resisting. For tomorrow would determine whether I'd be able to enjoy tranquil evenings like this for the remainder of my retirement, or whether I'd invest my golden years battling Delilah's appeals from federal confinement. The property felt different that evening, not simply because of the concealed cameras and recording equipment, but because it had become the center of something considerably larger than my personal land conflict. This was regarding whether small-time criminals with government relationships could terrorize complete neighborhoods without consequences. I retrieved Gramps' worn leather Bible and examined the passage he'd underlined regarding David confronting Goliath. He'd written in the margin, sometimes the small person succeeds because he's resisting for something larger than himself. The sunrise would bring Delilah's concluding desperate attempt. She'd stormed through that entrance, assuming she was preparing to destroy her enemies, never understanding she was preparing to destroy herself. The stage was established. The cameras were operating. Law officials were in position. All we needed to execute was wait for Delilah to provide the grand conclusion to her own criminal career. The flavor of anticipation combined with sunrise coffee had never been so satisfying. State Prosecutor Helen Sinclair was nothing like I'd anticipated. Instead of some intimidating government figure, she was this approachable woman in her 50s who reminded me of my former secondary school administrator. Demanding but reasonable, with eyes that noticed everything. She'd appeared at my property at precisely 8:30 morning, carrying a container of coffee and a briefcase full of proof that would transform everything. "Mr. Hamilton," she stated, settling into Gramps' traditional recliner like she belonged there. Your records has assisted us construct situations against HOA corruption networks in 7 regions. What you reveal here isn't simply local deception. It's involved in a regional behavior of arranged theft. We were engaged in discussion regarding the criminal accusations when we detected it. The distinctive sound of Delilah's luxury vehicle entering my driveway excessively rapid. Stones spraying everywhere like she was performing some type of high-speed pursuit. Vehicle entrances slammed. Various voices yelling instructions regarding camera positions and audio equipment. Delilah had brought her complete social media production team for what she assumed would be her moment of victory. Here we proceed. Agent Martin whispered into her earpiece from her concealed location behind my storage structure. State Prosecutor Sinclair didn't even react. She simply calmly continued taking documentation regarding the financial proof, while Delilah's voice became louder, preparing herself into righteous anger for her live broadcast audience. "This is it, everyone." Delilah's voice transported clearly through my glass. "We're preparing to reveal the corruption that's been targeting our family. The region's top prosecutor is unlawfully meeting with our harasser, probably organizing more official persecution." The sound of her expensive shoes clicking aggressively across my wooden deck was like a countdown timer to disaster. Her disaster, not mine. Destruction. The entrance exploded inward like she'd utilized a destruction tool instead of her foot. Wood fragments everywhere. The prosecutor's coffee container struck the floor with a ceramic destruction that emphasized the moment flawlessly. Delilah stormed into my living area with her phone held elevated, live broadcasting everything, completely unaware to the reality that she just performed criminal invasion, breaking and entering an assault in front of the region's chief prosecutor. I demand to understand why the state prosecutor is secretly meeting with this individual. She screamed, waving her phone around like it was some type of weapon. "This is official harassment, government persecution. I possess privileges." The expression on her features when State Prosecutor Sinclair calmly stood and displayed her official identification was absolutely priceless. Delilah's live broadcast recorded the precise moment when her brain processed what had just occurred. Total frozen terror. Mrs. Crawford, the state prosecutor, stated in that calm, expert tone that probably made hardened criminals terrified. "I am Helen Sinclair, state prosecutor of this area. You have just performed various crimes in my appearance and your complete criminal performance is being recorded by both my department and your own social media transmission." Delilah's phone was still live broadcasting. Her followers were observing in actual time as their hero sentiment became a stammering, incoherent disaster. The response area exploded with confusion and disbelief as individuals understood they'd been supporting a criminal who just self-destructed on camera. This is my neighborhood. I possess authority here," Delilah stammered, still somehow assuming her HOA badge provided her authority over government prosecutors. That's when federal agent Martin stepped through my still open entrance, flanked by 3 other federal officials. "Mrs. Crawford, you're under capture for deception, extortion, witness intimidation, and criminal harassment. And grateful to your live broadcast, we possess your admission transmitted to approximately 3,200 witnesses." Sound of handcuffs securing echoed through my property like the closing of a book. Delilah's phone crashed to the floor, still broadcasting her capture to an audience that had reduced from outraged supporters to horrified observers observing a public collapse. "Delilah," I stated, standing from Gramps' couch with a satisfied expression, "meet the state's top prosecutor. She's been desiring to discuss your financial methods." The residents who'd been attracted by the disturbance stood on my deck observing in stunned silence as the woman, who terrorized our neighborhood for months, was informed her Miranda privileges in my living area. Mrs. Chun, who traveled from her daughter's location specifically for this moment, had tears flowing down her features. Law Director Garcia appeared precisely in time for the arrest walk. Delilah stumbling in handcuffs past the identical dock she'd attempted to have demolished, past the identical solar equipment she claimed were dangerous, past the identical property she'd labeled an eyesore. The bright white luxury vehicle with its authority-first custom plates was removed as proof in the deception situation. The live broadcast concluded with Delilah's voice echoing across the water. "This isn't finished. My spouse will resolve this. You don't understand who you're managing." Actually, Delilah, we understood precisely who we were managing. A criminal. And criminals proceed to confinement. Observing. Delilah received sentence 4 months afterward felt like celebration morning. Federal Judge Robert Harrison didn't simply apply the regulations. He applied the complete legal library. 4 years in federal confinement, $375,000 in compensation to defrauded property owners, and a lifetime prohibition from serving on any HOA committee in the United States. Her spouse Thomas wasn't distant behind. The ethics examination revealed he'd been utilizing his role as government organization treasurer to provide insider data regarding regulation modifications and construction strategies. He resigned in disgrace and received 20 months for conspiracy and authority misuse. The HOA itself was dissolved faster than sugar in hot coffee. In its location. We formed the Silver Springs Water Volunteer Organization. Emphasis on volunteer. No mandatory charges, no citation authority, no power-obsessed leaders, simply residents. Collaborating to maintain our small portion of Paradise Beautiful. My role in revealing the corruption operation earned me something I never anticipated. Informant compensation from the recovered deception finances. Reality is when you assist the federal officials recover hundreds of thousands in stolen finances. They're quite generous with the rewards. That payment for $48,000 felt like vindication for every sleepless evening Delilah had produced for me. But the genuine victory was observing justice expand outward. State Prosecutor Sinclair utilized our situation as the foundation for new regional regulations that I still can't believe possesses my identity on it. The Hamilton Protection Act demands all HOAs to experience yearly independent financial examinations and generates criminal penalties for harassment-based land manipulation operations. 4 other regions utilized our proof to prosecute similar deception networks. Reality is Delilah's function was involved in a considerably larger network of politically connected criminals systematically robbing property owners throughout rural neighborhoods. The federal investigation's concluding documentation identified over 28 related situations spanning 6 regions. The families who'd been expelled from their residences began returning also. The Morrison family purchased a beautiful new property, 3 lots from mine, after their former land's fraudulent worth concerns were legally canceled. Mrs. Chin relocated back from Texas and organized a community celebration that continued until sunrise. Land worth didn't simply recover, they increased. Reality is when you eliminate the constant danger of harassment and fraudulent citations. Individuals actually desired to reside in a tranquil waterfront neighborhood. Who would have assumed? The transformation extended beyond legal victories. Our small water became a model for sustainable neighborhood lifestyle. My independent property, once Delilah's target for eyesore citations, now conducts monthly tours for individuals interested in solar energy and environmental management. The Regional Environmental Organization featured us in their Renewable Power demonstration program. I established the Gramps Heritage Scholarship utilizing portion of my informant compensation. $550 grants for youth entering trade education programs. Gramps always believed that working with your hands was the foundation of an honest existence. Seemed appropriate to assist the following generation learn those identical values. The yearly Silver Springs Water Festival has become an area attraction, raising finances for veterans' housing support programs. Previous year, we generated enough to finance 4 tiny residence projects for homeless veterans. The satisfying smell of barbecue and the sound of families laughing together replaced the toxic atmosphere Delilah had generated. But the optimal portion, the quiet moments. I'm relaxing on Gramps' deck currently, observing the sunset color the water in shades of gold and purple. The waterbirds are calling to each other across the water, their voices echoing off the identical hills where Gramps taught me to fish 62 years back. My solar equipment hummed tranquilly on the roof, operating a lifestyle that's finally my own again. No more registered letters, no more examination visits, no more expensive shoes clicking across my dock at dawn. Simply the gentle movement of waves against age. Wood and the knowledge that sometimes if you're stubborn enough and righteous enough, the small person genuinely can defeat the giant. The documentary team from a major streaming service finished filming here recently. HOA Disaster: How One Individual Dismantled a Criminal Organization premieres. Following spring, they compensated me enough to construct a guest property where other harassment victims can remain while resisting their own battles. Because Delilah wasn't unique. There are power-obsessed HOA dictators in neighborhoods throughout the country, terrorizing senior property owners and stealing from neighborhood finances. But currently, there's a guide for resisting back. Currently, I desire to hear from you. Where are you from? Tell us in the comments below. And if you're loving this story, hit that like button and subscribe for more. Leave a response sharing your own HOA disaster. Believe me, you're not alone in this battle. These accounts require to be shared. Press subscribe if you desire more stories regarding everyday individuals dismantling corrupt systems, because there's significantly more where this originated from. Following week, I'm sharing about the municipal official who attempted to eliminate a veteran's food business until the owner's military connections chose to visit. Appreciation for spending time with us on HOAs, where the HOA dictators encounter their opposition. If this account had you celebrating or shocked, proceed and approve the video. Leave a response with your reaction and press subscribe so you're prepared for the following wild HOA tale.